Jack Smith, who previously served as special counsel, is reportedly preparing to respond forcefully as the Trump camp continues directing criticism toward him and the federal agents who worked with him. According to recent reporting, Smith has privately indicated that he is ready to explain publicly the case he was unable to fully present because of a Supreme Court ruling that granted broad presidential immunity and because of unfavorable decisions from a federal judge appointed under the Trump administration. In interviews mentioned in the report, Smith has made it very clear that he intends not only to defend his work but also to directly challenge what he believes are exaggerated or inaccurate claims made by Trump regarding the investigation. A former state attorney from Florida, Dave Aronberg, joins the discussion to break down the situation. He notes that many once believed the legal cases facing Trump would derail his campaign, but that prediction did not come true. Only one case proceeded to trial, the one in New York, and many in Trump's circle think it may have actually strengthened his campaign. Other cases were delayed and eventually halted, partly due to the Supreme Court's immunity ruling and later because of Trump's election victory. The question now is what to make of Smith's intention to take his case to the public, something he appears confident about. Smith understands the political atmosphere and realizes that he is being positioned as a major target for those seeking retribution from Trump's side. His latest court filing, which spans 165 pages, has drawn significant attention because it challenges every defense Trump has put forward and has caused concern not only within Trump's legal team but also among many political allies. Smith has gathered newly obtained evidence, statements from witnesses, and direct communications that, according to the filing, show Trump knowingly misrepresented the 2020 election, pressured officials to ignore the law in order to remain in power, and coordinated actions that ultimately led to the events of January 6. The document does not rely on speculation. Instead, it lays out documentary and testimonial evidence to support each claim. It includes Trump's private messages that contradict his public statements about believing the election was stolen. It also features records of his phone activity on January 6, illustrating his actions and communications during the attack on the Capitol. Additionally, the filing provides detailed accounts of pressure applied to officials such as Mike Pence, complete with quotes indicating Trump urged them to take actions outside the law. The filing thoroughly counters every defense Trump might offer, with prosecutors anticipating potential arguments and addressing them in advance using the available evidence. This type of extensive evidentiary presentation is the kind prosecutors rely on when seeking convictions, because defending against material described as this detailed and wide-ranging becomes extremely difficult. Setting aside commentary that often surrounds high-profile cases, the central point raised here is that such filings can be more reliable than headlines, which can sometimes distort or oversimplify complex legal matters. Returning to the topic at hand, the argument being made is that broad claims dismissing investigations as political or unfounded tend to ignore the individuals involved who reportedly came forward with information. For example, it has been described that a former employee involved in technical operations sought to speak with authorities about requests related to surveillance systems, and that there were also reports of concerns involving the handling of certain materials. Several people were said to have approached investigators with information, contributing to the body of material now associated with the case. To understand why this most recent filing has drawn so much attention, it helps to compare it with previous submissions from the same team. Earlier filings generally focused on charges and outlined portions of the supporting evidence. In contrast, the new filing is described as presenting a full narrative of the alleged conspiracy, documenting the timing of actions, the communications involved, distinctions between private statements and public claims, warnings about potential illegality, and decisions to proceed despite those warnings. When prosecutors assert that a defendant was aware certain actions were unlawful because legal advisors explicitly indicated so, and then show the defendant continued regardless while presenting a different public explanation, they frame this as evidence of intent, something that defense strategies often struggle to counter. The material at the core of the defense has also been addressed directly. One central claim has been that the former president sincerely believed the election had been compromised. The new filing reportedly includes information indicating he was repeatedly informed by advisors that there was no widespread fraud, that legal challenges had not succeeded, and that the election outcome was not in his favor. Private communications described in the document are said to show acknowledgement of this reality, even as public statements suggested the opposite. This disparity is presented as evidence of deliberate misrepresentation rather than genuine belief. The filing is also said to include internal discussions among aides about presenting disputed claims in politically advantageous ways despite allegedly knowing those claims were unfounded. A significant portion of the filing reportedly focuses on interactions with the former vice president. These details include accounts of phone calls, meetings, and written messages in which pressure was allegedly applied for him to refuse certification of electoral votes. The filing is said to contain testimony from the former vice president, members of his staff, and others who observed these exchanges. Testimony from someone who previously served in such a close role is considered especially influential because it comes from an individual presumed to have been aligned with the administration and therefore unlikely to fabricate claims. The implication is that such testimony carries substantial weight precisely because it comes from a witness who might have preferred not to be involved but was obligated to tell what occurred. The timing of the filing also appears deliberate. Presenting such a comprehensive account before trial forces the defense to react to the full scope of claims rather than selectively addressing pieces of the case later on. It pressures the opposing legal team to respond to substantial material immediately, leaving little room to postpone or avoid engagement with the core allegations. They cannot wait until the trial begins to determine their strategy because they must respond to the material already presented. Every explanation they give now creates additional statements that may later be used against them. If they attempt to reject evidence that is later confirmed in court, it exposes their lack of good faith and further damages their credibility with the jury. If they accept that the evidence presented is accurate, they essentially surrender major components of their defense. In either situation, being forced to react before the trial begins places them at a disadvantage. This filing matters for more than one individual's legal exposure because it forces a broader political confrontation. When the information is this extensive and this specific, continued public defense becomes nearly impossible. Supporters are confronted with the choice of either remaining loyal to someone facing overwhelming documented evidence or finally acknowledging the reality supported by facts. That decision is politically difficult, but it cannot be avoided. The concern shown by many within the political sphere indicates they understand they cannot continue defending a narrative that collapses under the weight of such detailed documentation. The importance of the newly released material lies in the depth of the information and why it has caused such strong reactions. A filing of roughly 165 pages signals that the evidence is extensive. This is not a short summary of allegations, it is a comprehensive account supported by a large body of material. It appears to contain or reference hundreds of documents, messages, and recorded statements. The sheer amount of information makes it impossible for the defense to challenge everything. They must attempt to counter hundreds of details, any one of which could be enough to establish wrongdoing. That creates a nearly impossible workload. The additional material introduced here also seems to include information that was not publicly available before. Earlier reports and filings provided a partial picture, but this appears to include new statements, new documents, and new exchanges. Each new piece is something the defense has had no time to frame or reinterpret. The element of surprise makes it more difficult to counter because supporters have not been prepared to disregard or reinterpret these details. Statements from witnesses appear to come from a broad range of individuals: staff members who observed events directly, officials who were pressured, specialists who describe why certain behavior was unlawful, and participants who have chosen to cooperate and describe what occurred behind the scenes. When several independent groups of witnesses provide accounts that support one another, it creates a powerful cumulative effect. If staff describe certain actions, officials describe the pressure they received, experts confirm the actions were unlawful, and cooperating participants explain how these actions were coordinated, the combined testimony becomes extremely difficult to dispute. The most damaging information appears to be direct communication attributed to him, because it represents his own words rather than interpretations from others. If messages, calls, or written directives show him instructing others to take actions that violate the law, this becomes direct evidence. A defense may try to question the reliability of witnesses, but it is nearly impossible to deny the authenticity of documented statements made by the individual himself. This is why the existence of direct communication is so significant. It's proof that can't be denied or spun. The systematic dismantling of Trump's innocence claims means Smith has anticipated and addressed every possible defense. Defense attorneys will argue Trump believed the election was stolen. Smith presents evidence showing Trump was told he lost. Defense will argue Trump was just exercising his rights to challenge election results. Smith shows Trump's actions went far beyond legal challenges into criminal conspiracy. Defense will argue Trump didn't intend January 6 violence. Smith shows Trump knew the crowd was armed and sent them to Capitol anyway. For every defense argument, Smith has preemptively presented evidence showing that defense fails. This comprehensive approach is what prosecutors do when they have overwhelming evidence. They leave no room for reasonable doubt. Trump's private communications contradicting public claims is classic evidence of, if you say one thing publicly while your private communications show you believe something different, you're deliberately deceiving. Smith apparently has Trump privately acknowledging he lost while publicly claiming victory. That proves Trump was lying to the American people. And those lies were in service of the criminal conspiracy to overturn the election. The disconnect between private truth and public lies is exactly what prosecutors use to prove fraudulent intent. The data on Trump's phone usage during January 6 apparently shows who Trump was calling, when he was calling them, how long calls lasted. This phone data places Trump's communications and precise timeline with events. If phone records show Trump called certain people right before certain events happened, it shows coordination and direction. If records show Trump wasn't calling law enforcement or National Guard to stop the violence, but was instead calling congressional members to pressure them, it shows Trump's priorities during the attack. Phone records are objective evidence that creates timelines that can prove coordination and intent. The specific pressure campaigns targeting Pence are documented with exact quotes showing Trump's demands. Having exact quotes is important because it prevents Trump from claiming he's being mischaracterized or taken out of context. Pence's testimony, combined with documentary evidence of what Trump said, creates irrefutable proof of the pressure campaign. The targeting of other officials beyond Pence shows the conspiracy was broader than just trying to get Pence to reject electoral votes. Smith apparently has evidence of Trump or his team pressuring state legislators, pressuring state election officials, pressuring DOJ officials, pressuring various members of Congress. The breadth of the pressure campaign shows this was systematic conspiracy involving multiple approaches all aimed at the same illegal goal. When you can show defendant try multiple different illegal schemes all toward the same goal, it proves intent and proves consciousness of guilt. The subverting of vote certification through multiple methods is all part of one overarching conspiracy. The fake elector scheme, the pressure applied to the vice president, the efforts to influence state officials, and the events of January 6 are presented as interconnected components of a single alleged conspiracy. Under conspiracy law, participants can be held responsible for all acts carried out in furtherance of the conspiracy. This means that even if one individual did not personally produce fraudulent documents, they could still be held liable if those actions were part of the broader scheme. The timing of presenting this evidence before trial appears to be designed to place significant strategic pressure on the defense. The legal team must decide whether to file motions to dismiss, motions to exclude certain evidence, or remain silent and allow the narrative to dominate. Each option carries potential disadvantages, which is why detailed pretrial briefs are common when prosecutors believe they have a particularly strong case. The volume of material included in this filing exceeds what could realistically be presented in a single trial, giving prosecutors flexibility to select the evidence that most effectively responds to the defense as it unfolds. This strategic advantage is difficult for a defense team to counter because the prosecution can adapt and emphasize the strongest points. The reported impact of this filing on political allies is significant. Members of the former president's party may recognize that continued defense is increasingly untenable given the detailed evidence presented. For years, some political figures have described investigations as politically motivated and dismissed the claims as weak. Yet this filing is described as containing extensive documentation, making such arguments much harder to sustain. Politicians who have long defended the former president now face the choice of either continuing their support in the face of strong evidence or acknowledging they were wrong to defend him. Both options carry political consequences. Many have built their reputations around loyalty to him, having criticized prosecutors, witnesses, and investigations in the past. The filing challenges nearly all previous narratives regarding post-election actions, showing that claims of lawful challenges, genuine belief in fraud, or spontaneity of January 6 are contradicted by documented evidence. As a result, previous defenses are systematically undermined, leaving political allies with little room to respond without either acknowledging guilt or appearing dismissive of overwhelming evidence. Legal experts across the spectrum, including some with conservative affiliations, have reviewed the material and reportedly consider the case against the former president very strong. This consensus suggests a conviction appears possible based on the evidence presented, highlighting the seriousness of the situation for the defense team. Moving forward, the next step is for the legal team to respond to the filing. However, given the volume and specificity of the material, responding substantively without exposing weaknesses or conceding points is extremely challenging. The filing signals that both legal and political consequences are likely to unfold as the case progresses, making the coming period pivotal for the former president and his allies. Given the strength and volume of the evidence, there is reportedly no effective way for the defense to fully counter it. The legal team may focus on procedural motions, attempts to exclude certain material, debates over legal standards, or personal attacks on the special counsel, but addressing the substance of the evidence is extremely difficult because it is presented as directly demonstrating wrongdoing. Any substantive defense risks highlighting how damaging the material is. As a result, responses are expected to emphasize legal technicalities rather than directly defending the alleged conduct. The trial timeline is likely to move relatively quickly because the evidence has already been disclosed to both the judge and the defense, and there are few remaining discovery disputes. Depending on court schedules and pending motions, trial could take place in early to mid-2026, which raises the possibility of a verdict before the November elections. A pre-election conviction would carry major political consequences and would require significant adjustments in strategy for the former president's party. The filing also creates pressure within the political sphere, particularly for those who have previously supported him. Party members must decide whether to continue defending someone facing overwhelming evidence, distance themselves and risk backlash from a base loyal to him, or remain silent in hopes of avoiding controversy. None of these options are politically favorable. Opposition campaigns are likely to force responses by highlighting the legal findings and questioning whether attempting to overturn an election should disqualify someone from holding office. The material may also influence individuals who were involved in the alleged conspiracy, prompting some to cooperate with prosecutors before trial. Early cooperation tends to result in more favorable outcomes, while those who wait face stronger cases as more participants come forward. This dynamic creates a cascading effect in which the strength of the evidence encourages further cooperation, which in turn strengthens the overall case. The implications extend beyond immediate legal consequences. The former president's political future is reportedly threatened in ways that previous controversies did not, because the material concerns actions alleged to undermine democratic processes rather than financial or document-related issues. Even longtime supporters may be challenged when presented with evidence suggesting attempts to overturn an election through illegal means. These developments could influence not only the presidential race but also down-ballot elections in congressional, gubernatorial, and state legislative contests, as candidates across the country are forced to respond to the broader implications of the evidence. The former president's alleged actions are likely to become a central issue in congressional, gubernatorial, and state legislative races. Opposition campaigns may focus on defending democratic processes and highlighting the role of individuals who supported or enabled these actions. The impact of such messaging is heightened by the comprehensive nature of the evidence, which makes it difficult for defenders to shift the narrative. While a core group of unwavering supporters may dismiss the material as false or politically motivated, this group represents a smaller portion of the electorate than what is needed to secure electoral victory. Persuadable voters, including moderate Republicans and independents, are more likely to be influenced by detailed evidence of wrongdoing, and losing their support could have widespread implications for candidates aligned with the former president. The situation also places pressure on party leadership to re-evaluate their positions. Some senior figures have gradually distanced themselves, and the filing could accelerate that process. If enough leaders openly acknowledge the allegations and urge the party to move on, it may create political space for voters and lower-level politicians to do the same. Leadership plays a key role in signaling what is considered acceptable within a political organization. Beyond politics, this case sets a precedent for holding former presidents accountable through thorough, evidence-based investigations. Prosecutors in the future may study the methods used, and current and future officeholders may recognize that illegal actions can carry real consequences. This has a broader deterrent effect, reinforcing the principle that the rule of law applies to all, regardless of position. There are also constitutional considerations, particularly regarding the ability of democratic institutions to defend themselves from internal threats. The prosecution represents an effort to address allegations of attempts to subvert election results through legal channels. The outcome of these proceedings will demonstrate whether the law can effectively protect democratic processes from those willing to violate them. The timeline from filing to trial, verdict, and sentencing is expected to dominate public attention for months, influencing both legal discourse and political strategy across the country. Each stage of the legal process brings new developments and draws public attention. The former president is likely to be occupied with addressing legal challenges rather than focusing on political messaging or campaigning. Sustained legal pressure of this magnitude can undermine any attempt at a political comeback, as it is extremely difficult to campaign effectively while defending against extensive evidence of alleged wrongdoing in court. A likely conviction based on the evidence would force the party to confront difficult decisions about its future. Leadership must decide whether to nominate someone who may face conviction, consider an alternative candidate, or continue supporting him while risking electoral losses. These choices will shape the party and the former president's trajectory for years. Choosing to proceed with his candidacy despite potential conviction signals that loyalty to a base may outweigh electoral viability, while rejecting him would require admitting miscalculations and rebuilding support.